Hello, my name is Alex Keim, and I'm going to be talking about the evolution of comprehensive musicianship. The title of my paper was actually CMP plus, well, actually in parentheses, YCP plus CPS plus IMCE plus PIR, close parenthesis, to MMCP to HMP back to CMP. Funny story. So I wanted to write a paper about CMP because I thought it was an interesting topic. I'd heard Dr. Spieker talk about it, and what I didn't realize when I started to go to research is that there's two CMPs. I kind of knew that from class, but I wasn't very clear about that. So there's the Comprehensive Musicianship Through Performance program, and then there's the Contemporary Music Project. So actually, one of the main things I learned from this paper is that there's a clear distinction between the two. I ended up studying all of the first CMP, and I applied basically what comprehensive musicianship looked like from basically 1959 through that project. So the thesis that I had was the Contemporary Music Project's evolution of comprehensive musicianship foundationally influenced the Comprehensive Musicianship Through Performance program, as well as other programs and developments throughout the 1960s and 70s. So today I'm going to give a very broad overview of kind of what I saw, because I presented quite a bit of information, and I think just kind of getting a general tidbit of what happened where is sufficient. So first of all, there was kind of a philosophical grounding of comprehensive musicianship. There's a time period where it wasn't very clearly defined, and a lot of things kind of came together slowly as developments happened. So the first thing that happened actually was this YCP, which is the Young Composers Project. This is really the predecessor to what I call CMP-CME, which I'll talk about that in a sec. So this was run by Norman Delojoyo, and he said this about this. He said, in 1957, the Ford Foundation undertook an examination of the arts and their present place in the national scene. I was invited, among others, to volunteer any views I might have on the state of my profession. Subconsciously, I suppose, my experience as a composer-teacher led me to the spur-of-the-moment thought that a program of putting young composers to work as composers seemed pertinent to our time. So that program really took off. They took composers, they had a big application process, they put them in schools, and that's what they did. They taught, or no, they didn't teach, sorry. They were with the teachers, but their job was to compose. They had the school as their kind of playground. They weren't supposed to do other work, and it created a lot of these backdrops for things. What they learned, so composers actually learned a lot when they went to schools, and that is kind of the impetus for what happened next. Then we have the Contemporary Music Project for Creativity and Music Education, hence CMP-CME. I do that distinction in my paper to try to make it clear that I'm not talking about the CMP that most people know, or I didn't know, but most people know. Okay, so that's Contemporary Music Project for Creativity and Music Education. They combined with MENC, and they wrote to the Ford Foundation, and they got a grant for $1.38 million. Now, I didn't do a comparison, but in 1963, $1.38 million is quite a bit in what we would have now. There was 5 stated purposes in doing this. There was to increase the emphasis of the creative aspect of music in public schools, to create a solid foundation or environment in the music education profession for the acceptance, thorough understanding of the contemporary music idiom, to reduce the compartmentalization which now exists between the profession of music composition and music education for the benefit of composers and music educators alike, to cultivate taste and discrimination on part of the music educators and students regarding the quality of contemporary music used in schools, and to discover, when possible, creative talent among the students in the schools. So you can already see that they're addressing some of the things that the composers saw, some of these little tidbits about creativity, about not knowing enough for contemporary music. That's big. This project had many seminars and workshops and pilots. There was a couple of books, CMP 3 and CMP 4, that came out of this. And these books started to show basically a synthesis of expression between musical idioms. We're going to start to see people focusing on composing in the classroom. They're going to see more things of history built into what they're doing. So intentional synthesis. And just as a note, YCP changed its name to composers in schools, hence the CIS. So then, if you look next, we've got the seminar on comprehensive musicianship. This is pretty big. This happened on April 22nd, 1965 at Northwestern University. The goal was to analyze and adapt instruction primarily in college using A, current research, and B, observations from the composer programs. So all disciplines and levels of music, split groups, and background papers. So this had not just music teachers, but musicologists, not just musicologists, but teachers from all things. They brought everybody together, and they gave everybody background papers first. So they had all the research, and they all came in together, and then they split them by, like, this group went over and talked about how history and theory interact, and this group talked about this, and they did that, and then they broke them down. Each subgroup had a summary, and then they had an overall summary. So what's happening here is this ends up being kind of the rough draft, I called it, for what we know as comprehensive musicianship. There's not a clear definition. A lot of these people, it's kind of like philosophical musings. They're all just kind of debating what they think it is, and they're kind of going from there. So after this moment, we start to see applications of this idea. So what happens is these ideas are starting to be put into action. David Willoughby was a former assistant director of the CMP CME program, and he provided some insight into this. He said, comprehensive musicianship was promoted as an attitude, an approach, not as a method or an easily identifiable package of music learning that could be purchased and used totally or not at all. These disparate principles were collected by CMP and placed under an umbrella for purposes of national focus and attention, an umbrella that was called comprehensive musicianship. This is one of the second main things I learned, actually, is that comprehensive musicianship was pretty undefined for quite a long time. There wasn't really a real curriculum here. They're really just people that are saying, hey, I think it's this, and they started to get into an idea of synthesis and all-encompassing, but really it was, like Willoughby said, it was more of an attitude. And there's really just here what's happening is this attitude, this approach is starting to be applied in new ways. So 1965, we had the Manhattanville Music Curriculum Project, MMCP. And this was kind of an anomaly in this timeline. It's totally different than these other programs. However, when I researched this a little bit, I saw that there were a lot of creative projects that they were doing that were very similar to the pilot projects a year or two earlier from the CMP CME. Also notice too that a lot of, they're definitely different, but they kind of have the same approach, this total approach, this synthesis, this idea that music class is more than just one thing. So very different, probably the most different thing on this timeline, but still connected. 1966, we get the Institutes for Music and Contemporary Education. So there's 6 of these, just like there's 6 for MENC. What they did here is this regional idea is they're trying to take this music and they're trying to experiment and they're trying to figure out what it is. Some of the regional directors had some interesting things to say that kind of tell you what the state of comprehensive musicianship is. So Eunice Boardman said, this may be the spectacular flop of the century, but I can't see any progress being made in my mind as a music teacher until I find out. Samuel Adler noted, to me, it is the attempt to bridge the schism, to reunite the composer, the performer, and the audience, which is the greatest contribution of the Institutes for Music and Contemporary Education. Housewright stated, the institutes are an attempt to provide a more musical orientation for basic studies by transcending academic barriers between theory, history, performance, and education. Simply stated by Trotter, I hope the institutes can clarify this juncture between philosophy and practice. So further defining of what comprehensive musicianship is. And you can see that this is starting to really form together. 1967, we have the Airlie House Symposium in Virginia. What they're doing here is they're trying to figure out how to evaluate comprehensive musicianship. Here actually is probably the clearest definition. There's descriptive, performing, and creative competencies. And inside of those competencies, there's specific skills, mostly focusing on common elements. And also they talked about attitude. This assessment system really kind of showed where they viewed comprehensive musicianship outside of philosophy and more into practice. And I didn't study this, but I think it's interesting. these competencies, don't they sound kind of eerily similar to the music standards? I haven't done a study to see this, but I'd be really interested to see how much of this actually ended up in our national music standards the first time around. Anyway, so also that year they started a CMP library. What they did is they cataloged all this music that the composers had, and they also invented this innovative way of copying, which sounded pretty cool. And then Tanglewood happened, which most of us music educators know. They had a lot of guiding objectives from the Go project, and they had the Tanglewood Declaration, which kind of is hinted together, but it's kind of just something, it's an idea showing us that there's a lot of changes happening in this time. So there's a second grant for the Contemporary Music Project for Creativity in Music Education. This one was another 5 years. It stopped in 1973, and this one was $1.34 million. It's a lot of the same stuff, but just bigger. They changed the name again, so now we have Professionals in Residence, the PIR, over CPS. Their second focus is really just teaching comprehensive musicianship, and then they have lots of complementary activities, lots of services inside of conferences and things like that, lots of seminars. They even made a film. They had articles that they wrote all the time, and they also even had a CMP newsletter. More to the point, this is really where they started to recognize, this is where you start to recognize what you would consider to be CMP. You're really seeing this comprehensive musicianship approach, and it's really being applied pretty much systematically across the board. Werner said about this time, reflecting, comprehensive musicianship can be described as consisting of skills and understanding in each of the three essential components of musicianship: creation, performance, and analysis. That is, listening through either visual or oral perception. One of the chief goals of a comprehensive musical education is to enable the student, at whatever level his formal musical studies might terminate, to make valued judgments about the musical phenomena he will encounter as either a layman or as a professional. Further defining yielded an approach by analyzing music through common elements, which can provide common terms and principles that can be used in the study of all musics. So what's happening here is we're really seeing this philosophy really starting to meld into an idea that is tangible. And this program, the CMP+CPS+IMCE+PIR, was very successful. They met 23 out of the 35 Go project niches from Tanglewood, and they actually were instrumental in developing AP Music. I didn't know that. And Basic Musicianship in the National Association for School Music. So if you look at the graduate handbooks or undergrad, there's actually a Basic Musicianship statement, and it's there from this project. This is one of the other big learning things I did, was just the impact that this program had on education, on music education. It was huge for music education, and they did so much in this 10-year time, and so many important developments and lasting effects. It's kind of mind-boggling, actually. So that was pretty cool. Then what we have here is we have further really specific things happening. So we've got this book, Teaching Musicianship in High School Band. Labuda is taking this whole kind of comprehensive musician approach, and he's applying it straight to the band classroom. Then in 1973 is the official end of CMP+CME. This is just a little side note, but I noticed I was looking up the performance comprehensive musicianship through choir book, and I found in 1975 all the book reviews, all 4, were titled Comprehensive Musicianship Through Classroom Music, Comprehensive Musicianship Through Band. It was kind of funny, but the choir one stuck. But I just thought it was interesting that year, obviously, it was a big topic because every single book review that time was there. Blueprint for Band was by Garofalo. He added to comprehensive musicianship. He focused everything around the blueprint. Was the band piece itself was the blueprint. That was the whole idea. These two, Labuda and Garofalo, added a couple of things to what we consider comprehensive musicianship. They considered the music director as a teacher. That was kind of a new thing, I guess, is that idea. The music itself, the performance music you play, is the curriculum. And Garofalo also started to have effective outcomes inside of his blueprint. It was kind of random, but he had it in there to add. Finally, in 1977, we get to CMP that everybody knows, Comprehensive Musicianship Through Performance. Again, I didn't, but everybody else knows. This was another big learning moment that I seem to have missed from undergraduate study, and I honestly don't know that this kind of thinking approach existed. So this is a big learning experience for me too. This is the final application of comprehensive musicianship. The CMP model really integrated music selection, assessment, analysis, outcomes, and strategies. It's all about full engagement within music performance classrooms. It's specifically oriented for the music performance classroom. It's similar to comprehensive musicianship and Labuda and Garofalo, except for it intentionally plans for effective outcomes. I thought that was very interesting. It's very intentional. You're trying to purposefully get kids to emote and to get into that effective domain, and I think that's pretty cool. So the CMP program, basically it's a total application of all things comprehensive musicianship, and I believe the lasting effect and intentional synthesis of comprehensive musicianship with the added dimension of effective domain outcomes being really the icing on the cake. So there we have it. You can see here I've built the timeline. So we've got CMP with the parenthesis YCP plus CPS plus IMCE plus PIR, close parenthesis to MMCP to HMP back to CMP again. So a closing sentiment by Grant Baglarian. He was a former YCP composer at the very beginning, and he actually became the director in the last final years about the lasting legacy. He said, in all this one common element has characterized CMP-CME activities: the need to take calculated risks, to let go of the safe rope provided by academic dogma and institutional ritual. Without that risk, neither the young composers, nor the school music directors, nor students in elementary and secondary schools or graduate departments could have experienced the wonder of the responsible and disciplined human effort to reach for and to know the unknown. Hopefully, we will be able to see a program, idea, or approach like this at some point in our lifetime as music educators. I think it would be really neat. So thank you for watching, and I really hope that you learned something.